Welcome to Authbition. It's authenticity and ambition. It's the best of the best, bringing together vulnerability, non-attachment, caring, thoughtfulness, and whole-mindedness. If you're interested in how those five keys show up in this episode, check out my Substack newsletter. I've been publishing that every Monday on Substack, just once a week. And I review the most recent podcast and talk about how those five keys show up. So check it out and let me know what you think. I'm currently back in Raleigh after spending a week at the beach with family. It was a wonderful week on Emerald Isle, and I think there was 15 human beings, ranging from little kids up to grandparents and 3 dogs, and it was just a great time. And we had lots of awesome conversations, spent some time in the water, in the pool. But here I am, back in Raleigh. This is my front porch. And last week, I wrote an essay that was published in the Narrative Arc. It's a publication on Medium. And it's called, the title is, Let's Please Not Teach Students AI. And it is by far the most read essay that I've written to date. It's doing really, really well. It's not clickbait. It's a story that's grounded in love, and it comes from a place of frustration. I've been watching the buzz about teaching AI in schools, and I couldn't help but relive some of my own teaching moments where trusting students led to breakthroughs that no curriculum could have planned. The essay opens up with a memory of myself being a little kid, and I think I was probably, I don't know, third, fourth grade, and my aunt had this futuristic looking digital watch that she didn't know how to set the time on. And she would hand it to me and say, "Hey, Andrew, could you set the time?" And it's not like I knew. I didn't have instructions to use this digital watch. But I'd sit there and I would fiddle with it and figure it out, set the time, and give it back to her, and my aunt was happy. And when I look back on that experience, I just think, she was a school teacher for whatever it's worth. She taught in the New York City public schools, and she was smart enough to know that kids learn technology faster than adults. They just pick it up because it's around them. But for some reason, a lot of schools, at least my experience in school, was that they thought it was important to teach technology. And I remember, on the flip side, the opposite of what my aunt did by giving me technology and letting me figure it out, we were taught how to use BASIC in school. I think it was on a Commodore 64, and the memory storage was on a cassette tape, like a music cassette tape. And I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. I remember I stole the cassette tape and brought it home and recorded a track from Van Halen. I think it was probably Running with the Devil. And I brought it back to school the next day. I was hoping that the computer would explode when hearing Running with the Devil, but it just said syntax error. So, it was a good try. But the juxtaposition of this, on one hand, being handed a piece of technology and trusted to just figure it out on my own, versus being taught something that I was bored, right, at school, because I didn't need to learn this technology. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there's a very strong argument for making sure that technology is available to students, especially in underserved communities where they might not have access to the latest and greatest technology. So making technology available to students, I absolutely agree with. Um, but teaching students how to use it instead of letting them use it as a tool that they can learn as they go are really two different things. Um, and so, I did go on to study education. I was studying to become a high school physics teacher. So throughout my career, I've been a tutor in high schools, teaching math and science. I studied to be a high school physics teacher. I ended up going on to be a college professor and taught biomedical engineering, senior design at NC State for 12 years. Um, but this goes back to when I was studying to be a physics teacher, and everybody was telling me this was in Charlotte, and I lived in Noda, and I tutored at an inner city school. I want to say it was probably East Mecklenburg High School, if my memory is correct. But I'd hear from everyone, "Oh man, you're studying to be a high school physics teacher. You need to go to, so and so's class up in wherever in the burbs, and he's got the most incredible setup for a physics lab." And so I did this. I figured out who he was. Um, it was, I don't know, a half hour drive or something out of the inner city into the burbs of Charlotte, and found this fancy high school um, where the rich kids and went and found the classroom. And what I saw, and this is mid 90s, every bench in the classroom had two computers on it, and like one student per computer. And this was very rare to see, in a classroom, in a physics lab of all places. So um, the students were supposed to be working on an experiment where a block slides down an inclined plane. Learn about friction, the force to overcome static friction to get the block moving. Um, you learn about gravity. You learn about momentum, mass, and I think it's best to do this experiment with a block, like an actual physical block, on a board that you can tilt at different angles, and let it slide down the block, and have a pen and paper or pencil and paper, and draw the force vectors, the whole thing, right? I taught physics labs, so it was an experiment that I was familiar with at the time. Clearly, I'm foggy on it now. uh, but you know what? The kids weren't actually doing the experiment. They were on emails, playing games, instant messaging each other, and the teacher would walk around the room, and as he would walk around, they'd flip over to the experiment, which was very easy for them to do on the computer. Whether they were learning anything or not, it's hard to say. But he would walk around the room, and they'd flip to the experiment. So from his perspective, it looked like they were doing the experiment. And then as he walked away, they would go back to their shenanigans. And he got to the front of the room, and I was standing all the way in the back of the room, and I could see all of the students. There's emergency vehicles going by. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's pretty loud. Anyway, I could see the students all playing their games, and they were focused on instant messaging and games. And all the teacher could see was their eyes on the computer screens. And he looked at me, and he said something like, "You know how in teacher education they say that it's impossible to have 100% of the students' attention, engagement, and student engagement. It's impossible to have 100% student engagement." And then he had his palm up, and he swept his palm across the room like, look at my minions, and said, observe, observe, observe. 100% of my class engaged. And I was in the back of the room just laughing, thinking like, are you 100% of your students are engaged in playing their games. They're engaged in playing you, Mr. Teacher, but they're not engaged in the physics lesson that you think that they're supposed to be learning. And this was just, it was a signature moment for me because, I went into teaching to shake things up. I felt like um, in school we were being spoon-fed technology. We were learning facts and being asked to memorize things instead of learning how to think, learning to be creative, learning to work in teams, learning how to identify problems and come up with many different possible ways to solve those problems. Uh, I just thought that information is everywhere. It's like it's easy to find information, and schools were teaching information. Technology, again, in an underserved community, technology needs to be made available, but generally speaking, you can you can find technology, you can find information, you can find videos about using different kinds of technology. Um, that stuff is easy, but being responsible in how we use it, ethics and um, the the emotional part of learning. This is the piece that was left out, right? And so I really wanted to change that. And when this teacher swept his hand across the room and said, "Observe," and he thought they were engaged in learning, while I saw them engaged in shenanigans. That was just sort of this peak moment of, what are we doing? What are we doing here? Um, so I took this with me in my career. And the essay, I've got two stories. I'm only going to tell one of them today, just for the interest of time. Um, but one of these stories is I had this group of students who um, were working on a project. So I've taught senior design. This is senior design, biomedical engineering, NC State. Years and years had passed, and this had stuck with me. And in this class, I don't teach the students technology. I mean, in this class, the students are to identify unmet needs, unmet medical needs, and come up with novel ways to solve those problems. And they're the ones who are coming up with the solutions, right? And so these kids wanted to use a microprocessor with certain features that the microprocessor that they had learned, and it's like a tiny computer, um, to make a little portable thing. The one that they had learned in their instrumentation class was outdated, right? And so I asked them, is the one that you used in that class an industry standard? And they laughed. They're like, no, man, that thing is ancient history. And so, what do you want to use? And the microprocessor that they suggested was called the Sunspot. This is from Sun Microsystems, and it was way ahead of its time. I mean, it wasn't an industry standard either because it wasn't really popular in industry, and it was part of their Internet of Things, IoT initiative from Sun Microsystems. So back in, this was, I want to say 2006. Your average person was not familiar with IoT, with Internet of Things. Your average person wasn't thinking about smart homes um, like we have now. That this was very ahead of its time, and so I didn't know how to teach them how to use the Sunspot. It used Java, I think was the language. I wasn't skilled in Java. The students hadn't learned it, right? So what are we going to do? Students don't know it. Students don't know how to write JavaScript. I couldn't teach them it. We didn't have the microcontroller at the university. So what do we do? What are we going to do? And my suggestion to the students was, hey, why don't you just call Sun Microsystems and say, hey, we're a group of students at NC State. We're working on this project. The features that we want in a microprocessor your Sunspot has, and they did it. That's what they did. They called Sun Microsystems, and a salesperson at the company was delighted to receive the call. He lent them, I think actually two of the microprocessors and the development kit to go along with it. The students taught themselves how to code it. They built their prototype. It worked swimmingly. Everything worked great. And no one had to teach them how to do it. And they suggested it themselves, right? And so now flash forward in, today's context, it's AI. AI is everywhere. But AI is not new. AI has been around a really long time. And why it's a buzz right now is because of critical mass. It's become, it's in the current popular discussions, and I'm reading about, hey, we need to teach this. We need to teach AI in schools. Like our students are going to fall behind in this argument. And I'm thinking, man, these students have been using AI probably since before you've even ever heard of it. Students adapt faster than adults. Our job isn't to teach them every tool. It's to invite them how to solve real world problems. And if they use AI, then great. Look, what are schools really for? I believe, one way I like to describe school is that it's an exploration with experienced explorers. The students are exploring the world, and I'm exploring it with them. I learned so much from my students because they introduced me to things I've never heard of. I mean, if I had listened to my students about Bitcoin, I'd be a bazillionaire. Like, they told me about it a decade before I had heard about it in the popular press, right? These students know about this stuff. And school is about asking questions. It's about solving problems. I feel like I want to learn side by side with students. I can guide them in how to ask good questions, maybe where to go look, or mistakes that I've made in my life that, maybe they can learn from. But I don't need to sit down and teach them how to use the technology. Are there basics to learn? Yes. There's something timeless in how quickly technology changes, and yet how often we forget that students already live ahead of us. My teaching philosophy has always been to center the person, not the tool. The best outcomes happen when the students are challenged with purpose, not handed instructions. That's true for AI today, and it was true for BASIC on a cassette tape when I was a kid. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll put the original essay in the speaker notes. Check it out. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Health, happiness, kindness, respect for every being and all things. Namaste.